No one joins the military with the illusion that they are entering a safe profession.
The military's toughest jobs. We'll see about that. Let's go.
Dangerous military jobs.
Some are more hazardous, bro.
Who is tasked with saving Navy SEALs when they're in trouble? This unenviable task often falls to pararescue jumpers, who climb and dive from insane heights in order to save those in need.
I don't know if that's Navy SEALs, Navy corpsmen. That's a good question. I never worked with any PJs. I knew some years later I met. Seems like they do yeoman's work, have a long-ass pipeline. Let's keep watching.
These highly trained experts take part in every aspect of the mission and are skilled parachutists, scuba divers, and rock climbers. And they are even Arctic trained in order to access any environment to save a life when they're called to do so. Training is extremely challenging both physically and mentally, but if you graduate and wear the maroon or
figure their training pipeline is 3 years, 38 weeks combat medic, and the rest is just SF. So they're on the tip of the spear, like angel-hearted warrior demon killers.
beret, you will be one of the most highly trained combat medics in the world, able to handle the most stressful situations with ease. Some even refer to these soldiers as guardian angels because they keep their comrades safe in all situations. The unit traces its lineage to 1943 during the Second World War. A C-46 had failed, and the dozens of airmen it carried had bailed out over the jungles between China.
What do they say? That necessity is the mother of all invention? World War II brought in, I would say, the birth of all formalized SF by every allied nation, PJs included.
Present-day Myanmar, the only route to reach the men was by air, so 2 medical corps men parachuted down and stayed with the men for over a month, tending to injuries until they could reach safety. By the Vietnam War, pararescue was an official unit, wearing its signature maroon beret, the color a symbol of its blood sacrifice, and its insignia, an angel cradling an earth. Special Operations is an umbrella term for a number of specialized military units, including the Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Air Force Special Tactics. Because these groups are used...
Special Operations has been an overly used word. I knew some SEALs that said being a grunt would be the worst job because at least when they're done, they get to leave. They go do their mission, they haul ass. Where the day-to-day grind sometimes I think can be even more dangerous because you got less training. Guys, let me know what you think.
For highly risky missions, such as the assassination of Osama bin Laden, these soldiers are often put into extremely dangerous situations. Each Special Operations unit is highly trained in general combat and small unit tactics. Each one can be used for many general Special Operations missions. However, each Special Operations group is primarily trained for specific types of missions. If one wished to attach
Well, that changed a lot after 9/11, right? You figured the SEALs spent half their time training in the water, and they did no training over the last no significant water ops over the last 2 decades. So the lines have changed. You know, you just don't use the Rangers to secure an airfield anymore, nor do the SEALs just do waterborne operations. Originally, the intent was a good idea.
Under the waterline on an enemy ship, for example, Army Rangers would not be the best choice. In this instance, the Special Operations Force with the most training and experience in underwater combat operations would be Navy SEALs. On the other hand, if one needed to deploy a highly trained light infantry force well inland behind enemy lines to destroy a significant military target, you can't do much better than a company of Army Rangers. And bear in mind that it is
Now, whether it's a company of Army Rangers, a company of Marines, some of these things they're saying, at least in this video, they're mixing and matching what just the typical infantry does. I'm not sure that's Special Operations. Now, I will say that the Rangers have been involved with more Tier 1 units and Tier 1 operations in the last 10 years than ever in their history.
Extremely competitive to get into these programs. The competitive standard to be even considered for Navy SEAL training is to swim 500 yards in 10:30, do 79 push-ups, 79 sit-ups, 11 pull-ups, and run 1.5 miles in 10 minutes.
Let's be honest, those stats aren't going to even get you an application to go. You'll be still stuck on this ship shoveling chow with that kind of shit.
This one should not come as a surprise. The Bomb Disposal Unit is tasked with dismantling explosives when they are found in a threatening area. While they are highly trained, there's always a chance the bomb could detonate while they are disarming it. Assigned to some of the most dangerous missions, they perform tactically harrowing and technically demanding tasks in diverse environments worldwide. A job for the best and bravest. They do what needs to be done to keep others safe.
Now, you figure World War II, bomb disposal were the engineers. There wasn't a unique position for that. I can tell you because my grandfather was in EOD effectively, but his MOS was an engineer. I've known some EOD guys, and they were very confident. They felt like they understood the mechanics, electrical components, everything around the bombs. That was pre 9/11. They did a lot of IED stuff, but now it seems like EOD is even more important. Clearing roads, understanding how to disarm them as needed. Seems like we blow a lot in place.
Job training for an explosive ordnance disposal specialist requires 10 weeks of basic combat training and 37 weeks of advanced individual training. This unit was developed during World War II because previous wars did not necessitate the dismantling of sophisticated bombs. Before the war, there was no method or organization to deal with undetonated bombs. Since then...
Now, I can't tell you a story. I mentioned my grandfather. He was in the bomb disposal, clearing minefields after World War II. And what they used, believe it or not, imagine this today, they used captured German or Nazi soldiers ahead of them to help clear the land minefields. Imagine trying that today with the Taliban.
Need for this unit has only increased. Unsurprisingly, infantry or foot soldiers are the military unit putting themselves on the front line and therefore into danger's way. Infantry traditionally relies on moving by foot between combats as well, but may also use mounts, military vehicles, or...
I'd have to say that the infantry's got to be one of the most dangerous jobs because you have the least amount of training for the most responsibility. Now, hear me out. The guys that are humping gear, doing patrols in Afghanistan, they're in constant harm's way. They're not coming in for a mission, getting out. They're staying there, day-to-day patrols. So these guys in today's world and the culture we've been living in are probably have one of the most dangerous jobs.
Other transport. Infantry make up a large portion of all armed forces in most nations and typically bear the largest brunt in warfare, as measured by casualties, deprivation, or physical and psychological stress. Originally, job training for infantrymen required 14 weeks of one-station unit training, which included basic combat training and advanced individual training. Part of this time was spent in the classroom and part in...
Military has stepped up their infantry training, the time spent and the money spent. There's a lot more technology. These guys got to understand more weapon systems. Hopefully with the advent of the super high-tech war goggles, we don't lose sight of the fundamentals and don't just focus on the tech, because I think these guys are going to need it. Smaller skirmishes, we'll call it, versus big world wars in the future.
Field. But a little more than a year ago, the Army kicked off a pilot program that looked to add 8 weeks to the infantry one-station unit training, all in an effort to make new soldiers more lethal. They're conducting 74 miles of foot marches, and a total of more than 100 foot miles marched in the course. Each trainee has fired 2,475 live rounds by the program's end. That's compared to 1,355 under the 14-week model.
They're always trying to quantify it, right? If you fire 2,000 rounds, it's better than 1,500 rounds. You hope all these stats this guy's pulling out. I've heard that the Army says, hey, they're going to fire more rounds, longer boot camp. They're going to do more marching or running. To a degree, I think that matters. As long as we don't waste our time on other crap, like let's dump the cell phones, let's dump the weekend internet sessions, rant over.
According to a report released by the U.S. Army. Did you know the Army still has cavalry? The soldiers of the U.S. Army have a different type of cavalry than in the old days. Obviously, cavalry used to ride on horseback, but these days things have changed dramatically. They now have mechanized cavalry, made up of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and Humvees. Beginning with traditional strengths, Army cavalry have historically combined mobility, protection, and firepower to allow both stealthy and forceful.
I never spent any time working with the cavalry. So you guys that have, put it in the comments. How do they stack up compared to the rest of the infantry? How do they fit in? It's just a term of art, so it's effectively infantry. It maybe is involved, attached to a cavalry division. Let me know.
While scouts have achieved success in recent decades utilizing M3 cavalry fighting vehicles, Stryker Reese vehicles, and Humvees, they have likewise benefited from organic integration of M1 Abrams tanks and Stryker mobile gun systems. Job training for a cavalry scout requires 16 weeks of one-station unit training. Some of it takes place in the classroom, but most of it will be spent on the field. Whether it's taking part in squad maneuvers, target practice, or war games, cavalry scouts are constantly...
Seems to me like they're just doing basic infantry training, Maybe they're attached to a fast mover, say APCs, helicopters. I'm not exactly sure how this differentiates from, say, the regular infantry in the Army.
Finding their skills to keep themselves sharp. Though they have the benefit of an armored vehicle to protect them, these vehicles are often targets, thus putting cavalry in a dangerous situation. In civilian life, the term engineer might conjure up some sort of math-oriented, pencil-pushing type who frets over numbers and angles for a living. But in the Army, not all engineers are sitting at desks. With the motto of UBEAK.
Now, I think the engineers can have one of the hardest, most dangerous jobs. Now, hear me out. You run a backhoe or a dozer, you're trying to set up a fob in Fallujah. You can't guard that thing enough with armor. IEDs could be cleared, but you're just a sitting duck to be shot at. And the variety of missions they do, but I'm just thinking of that one in particular.
Meaning everywhere. Military engineering is a varied and exciting trade. It includes bridge building, small boat handling, and explosives handling, among many other skills. Put simply, a combat engineer is a jack of all trades who can be called on at any point to do numerous tasks.
Now that's a job that may be transferable into the civilian world. You know how to build houses, you know plumbing, you know water filtration and purification. I could see that one being a very useful skill when you got out. I had a friend that did 30 years in the Marine Corps as a combat engineer, retired, never did anything else, but he had a lot of skills, a broad set of skills that you couldn't recreate in too many other MOSs in the Marine Corps.
Combat engineers can wield a chainsaw, build a bridge, clear a minefield, build a road or airfield, and use explosives to demolish a target. Combat engineers also conduct basic construction tasks and purify water. Job training for combat engineers requires 14 weeks of one-station unit training, which includes basic combat training and advanced individual training. Part of this time is spent in the classroom and part in the field with on-the-job instructions. While this combat position is...
There's got to be a bunch of subsets of MOSs and combat engineers, because if you know how to run equipment, you may not know water purification or building a house, right? These guys cover a lot of ground and are critical. I got a video coming out about Seabees, which are the Navy's version. And these guys are really the backbone of the infantry in particular, getting stuff done. If you need a bridge built, you got to call the engineers.
Technically closed to women, some have actually been able to train as combat engineers for years at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. By 2013, 55 women had graduated. Artillery soldiers go through the same basic training as everyone else, but they have a very specialized training afterward to help them gain a specific skill set. The operation of an artillery howitzer is a complex task that requires several components that need to be integrated. The crew of the howitzer usually...
And they're a definite high-value target for enemy, especially if there's enemy aircraft, because you want to take out all the artillery as soon as possible, any kind of command and control. Not to mention just a back-breaking job. I knew a guy who got out as a staff sergeant after 14 years. And he was, I want to say, like a crew chief, one of these big guns. And it's a lot of work. You got to get that joker there set up, and you can't make too many mistakes on where you're hitting. Probably going to change a lot with tech.
Does not see the enemy position on which they are executing artillery fire. The artillery pieces are organized in batteries that are located deep behind infantry positions. Forward observers are the ones who actually visualize the target and relay target coordinates to a fire control center, which transforms the data and computes gun parameters that are introduced by artillery crew members into howitzer settings. Some artillery officers spend a lot of time in field training exercises, where they work, eat, and sleep outdoors and in tents.
Now that's an area, if the tech goes bad, shit can go really south, right? They give you the computer, beams in, and adjusts the actual gun. But if that goes bad, you got to know how to do basic, we'll call it land nav, or at least grid coordinates, and how to use the gun without the tech. That's going to be an interesting problem when we get more and more down the road of tech, how we operate these guns. Now, are they still going to be as important with drone technology? I doubt it, right? What do you guys think?
Live and work aboard ships. Artillery and missile officers may work in locations such as underground launch command centers or submarines. This means they are often in exposed or uncomfortable situations, which makes it hard to defend themselves, especially when the enemy is usually not visible. What is an Army medic, and what does he or she do? You might assume that the medic in Army medic is simply shorthand for a doctor or nurse, part of the medical staff.
Now, the military, at least in the Marine Corps, we use Navy corpsmen. We always call them doc. They were like a combination of an ER physician, trauma nurse, about everything. And the ones that chose to join the Marine Corps, at least come to the Marine Corps, right, go green, they had to put up a lot of shit. You know, they'd hump the gear with the infantry, do everything else. but I guess probably better than handing out ibuprofen at the big base.
But medic is actually an official job within the U.S. Army with a specialty listing. A medic is not a nurse or a physician, but a healthcare specialist trained to give basic medical treatment and take care of soldiers in emergency situations. Although there are similarities, Army combat medic training and civilian medic training are two different things. The main difference between EMT training and Army medic training.
Now, one thing the corpsmen are good at the medics is teaching the young soldiers how to treat them, right? So our corpsmen used to say, hell, if I get hurt, you idiots have to take care of me. So you learn a lot of field trauma medicine. They teach you some in training, but depending on the corpsman, they'll really prep you up so you're useful on the battlefield.
Is that Army medics are trained to provide medical assistance in combat situations and can do trauma care that is beyond the scope of a civilian medic. Job training for a combat medic specialist requires 10 weeks of basic combat training and 16 weeks of advanced individual training, including inpatient care. Pilots are active in both the Air Force and the Navy. Though their job descriptions are similar, naval pilots often take off from aircraft carriers and pursue conflicts over water.
Now, if you ever see one of these planes land on an aircraft carrier listing or in a big storm, that is a dangerous-ass job. I don't know how they do it. Now, a lot of people want to become pilots. In particular, they want to become F-16 pilots, and they end up flying a big transport plane or troop carrier plane. It's a tough gig, but these guys are always motivated. I've never met one pilot that did not love the job.
As Air Force pilots are more often found fighting over dry land, but their missions are not always violent. Military pilots perform a variety of duties and may, for example, transport military cargo and passengers.
Yeah, the shitty
They may
part.
conduct reconnaissance missions, where high-flying, photographically equipped aircraft are used. They could be involved in aerial combat, where fighter aircraft are used as weapons platforms. Fighter pilots, on the other hand, undergo specialized training in aerial war.
How do you think the pilot world's going to change with drones becoming more and more prevalent and reaching farther without having the need for rest?